Welcome to the Wellbeing Uprising. I'm your host, Bethany Ainsley. In today's episode, we're diving into a conversation that still makes many people feel uncomfortable: menopause in the workplace. Joining me today are two incredible guests who are breaking the silence. First, we have Sharon MacArthur, known as Miss Menopause, who's made it her mission to educate organisations and challenge taboos around menopause. She's worked with companies across the UK to increase menopause awareness.
He said, well, I can't leave. I couldn't run my business. They're brilliant. And I said, this is why you need to understand the impact of menopause for you and your business.
And we're also joined by Dr. Elouise Leonard-Cross, Group Head of People at Northumbrian Water, who are actively working to support employees through menopause and create a more supportive, inclusive culture.
Businesses that have trust can actually go through a lot and handle a lot. Businesses that don't tend to really struggle and they don't keep their people.
Despite affecting half the population, menopause is still shrouded in silence, misunderstanding and stigma.
The saddest thing most women say to me on a daily basis is, Sharon, I thought I had early onset dementia.
But that silence comes at a cost to performance, retention and well-being.
We know that people are getting perimenopause symptoms much earlier, even, sort of 30s onwards it's definitely not uncommon now.
What role do you think men play in opening up this conversation and supporting menopause in the workplace?
100% of 50% of the population of the world, let's be honest, is going to go through menopause, and the other 50% are going to encounter it themselves.
Let's start with the obvious. So would you say menopause is still a taboo topic in the workplace?
I would say it depends who you ask. So I've been doing this work for coming up 8 years now, and I would say when I started out, there was 5-10% of companies might have said that they were doing any kind of work around menopause. I'd love to know the figures. I don't think I've seen any figures come out recently, but even if we said it was up to 50%, you could say that's maybe half of workforces are maybe still not doing anything about menopause. So is it taboo? I would say it's still born out of ignorance. Most people haven't got a clue. The terminology is all mixed up. And if Sharon was for president, I would change all of the terminology because for me, it isn't really fit for the 21st century. But perhaps I can tell you more about that later.
Yeah, great.
I think from my perspective, I think taboo is quite a strong word, and I think we've definitely seen progress in awareness and people talking about it across a range of sort of different groups. It isn't just women talking about this; it is lots of different groups. I think for me, it comes very, very much echoing what Sharon said there. It's more about people maybe potentially being uncomfortable or not, not feeling there's support or space or how to approach it. So it's maybe too much an avoided topic at times rather than necessarily I'd define a taboo.
That's really interesting. In your experience, what are the biggest misconceptions that businesses have about menopause?
That it only affects women of a certain age. And that's my least favourite phrase, let me tell you, because it doesn't really mean anything, because actually menopause technically can affect anybody of any age. And the saddest case I've read about was I'm going to call her a young girl of 12. So thankfully that's exceptional. So for me, menopause is everybody's business, not just women of a certain age. We've really got to ditch that old-fashioned view, I think.
Where do you think that particular misconception comes from?
History, from the past. We'd hear about, if I'd asked my mum or my grandma, what do you know about menopause? They would have referred to something called the change. And they would have whispered behind like the hands, oh, we're going through the change. And I would think, my goodness, what on earth are women changing into? I had no idea, but it was kind of secretly whispered about behind closed doors, behind other women, but nobody really talked about it. So even, when I was starting my menopause at about, probably early 40s, I didn't have a clue what it was all about.
When do you think that education piece needs to come in?
School. We need to teach young people from a very early age, and not just about the biology of menopause for me. Because yes, we might learn about, the biology, the workings of the human body, that's fine. But from a psychological point of view, we know that women are having children later in life. So you could be a young person who's staying on at school longer. We know young people are mostly staying on till they're 18 and then they're going to university and stuff. You could be living at home with a menopausal mum. So wouldn't that be great if all young people were taught about menopause, then it would just become business as usual, because it wouldn't be this big thing. We'd all just know about it from a very young age, and it would just become part of society, part of everyday conversation, part of everyday life. And that really is what I'm hoping for one day.
And you're right, it does affect everyone, doesn't it? What about yourself, Elouise? What's the misconceptions that you've seen?
I think sometimes the assumption around the age it happens, that actually we know that people are getting perimenopause symptoms much earlier, even, sort of 30s onwards is definitely not uncommon now. So, that you can't assume it affects a certain group in your organisation. And as well that, the assumption is that it affects those that are experiencing menopause or perimenopause. It doesn't impacts their network, the people who rely on them, the people who they support. So sometimes looking at it too much in isolation, for me, is a bit of a misconception.
And in terms of the sessions that you deliver, Sharon, what's the reaction been from women within those sessions? Do they seem relieved, or are they still quite reluctant to talk about their experiences?
Oh, no. They're like, oh my goodness, it's like the dams burst. It's like, I'll tell you an interesting story. So it was during lockdown, and I was working on Teams, which, mostly that's what we were doing. It's just little tiles of humans. And I could see one woman looked like she was getting really upset. And I stopped the session and I just said, are you okay? And she said, I just need to say this, because I always call it the room of trust. She said, I need to say that I'm one of the directors in this business. She said, and I'm feeling quite emotional about it, because it feels like the very, very first time ever that I'm in a safe space where I can just say how it really is. And a lot of the things you're talking about are really connecting with me. And I guess I'm getting emotional out of relief that it's going to be okay. And to me, that's outrageous in the 21st century.
I was going to say, that's really sad, isn't it? And what about all those women who just aren't getting support?
Well, I think a lot of us women don't know what we don't know. So what we're doing is, because nobody's told us what getting older feels like, because we've never been in this territory before. So a lot of us wake up one day and think, oh, well, maybe this is just getting older. This is just maybe what it's like. You creak a bit, you can't remember things. And they're not realizing that hormones are, they make us the women that we are. And menopause is the decline of your hormones to such a point that it ends your fertility. So I think that's why we all need that level of education, so we can manage our own health and well-being a whole lot better. So a lot of women, the saddest thing most women say to me on a daily basis is, Sharon, I thought I had early onset dementia. And that's utterly, utterly terrifying. So you see a lot of women might be leaving the workplace out of absolute utter ignorance, because they just believe they're no longer capable. And the majority of women that I've worked with over the years, it's usually within less than 6 months. So they've been doing a job that they've been doing for maybe many, many years, very successfully, very, very well. They wake up one day, they've put their keys in the kettle, they can't remember why they've gone over there. And within less than 6 months, they're thinking, well, I'm really scared that I'm going to make a huge mistake in the work that I'm doing. So they elect to leave themselves. And often they don't know why it's happening to them. So what I'm saying is, we've got this, what I'm calling a void of ignorance that's out there for the women themselves, for those people in workplaces. So if we all learn about this, then that won't happen.
And what would you say to a workplace who might say that this is a personal issue rather than a workplace issue?
I would say, like I said earlier, it's really everybody's issue. Because if you run in a business, surely you want to be the most profitable, you want to make the most money, you want to deliver the best service to your customers. And so therefore you go out and you take a lot of time and energy and expenditure to find the best people. So once you found the best people, surely, logically, you would like to keep them for as long as possible. So menopause means that out of ignorance, you could be losing, and maybe have already lost, some great individuals from your business. And remember, this isn't just affecting women of a certain age. Remember my least favorite phrase. It's affecting your male colleagues as well. So we've got to understand that it's an investment that will be a good return on investment if you can normalize menopause in your own workplace and just enable anybody and everybody to get on with the work that you want them to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And Elouise, I'm really interested to hear your perspective from an occupational psychology perspective. How do you think this can affect an individual if menopause isn't spoken about?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we know about, that can be a symptom of many people who experience menopause is, anxiety, different things that impact their cognition, how they think and how they process information. one of the compounding factors we see when people push down not talking about things, and there can be two reasons for this. There can be one, they don't feel safe to do so. And there can also be that they're not doing it because they're not actually aware themselves. Very much as Sharon's talked about, it could be that they don't actually realise that it is this. But regardless of what it is, people are going through something and not talking about it. The impact tends to have is when we push thoughts down and don't talk about them, it's very much like water building behind a dam to an extent that it can't stop. And either it comes out at some point and it'll come out often in a way that then that individual will sort of potentially, sort of an outburst or an incident or a situation, which then they will beat themselves up about. Or worse, it can just be a very long, slow burn, and actually the anxiety gets worse, or they're pushing thoughts down. And what you find is your short-term memory will really start to impact. Now, you're already potentially getting that from the lack of hormones. You're then also getting that because you're holding on to things and not speaking up. So in the workplace, that has a huge impact because people will stop performing. Maybe when they've actually been able to do things really well before, they will start to struggle. And, as already been referred to, the worry is they then think, I'm not good enough, it's me, and either pull back, not contribute, or worst case scenario, leave.
And what barriers do you think stop leaders from talking about menopause?
I think for me, it's not, I think you definitely go to the education piece, but I'd almost step back a little bit on this. I think one of the things that I see in organisations that don't do health in its widest form well is managers don't know the people they manage well enough. So everything starts from building a relationship with the individual, and through that, you kind of know when things change or when things are going on for people. You can read it very much like you can with a friend. You can see something. So I think the start point barrier is people not having enough one-to-one, and I am going to say face-to-face. I know we are in a more digital world, but the ideal is being with people. So having time with people, but then also that quality carved out time that's formally to listen. So you might call it performance management. We call it connect conversations at Northumbrian because it is time to come together and connect. That time is so important because it builds a relationship, but then gives you the forum to talk about anything. So there's the knowledge and the skills bit, which I actually think comes into it, but I think this bit that has to be in place first before any of it. You can train as much as you want, but if people haven't got the forums to talk about it or the relationship they feel they can bring it up, it's not going to help.
Yeah, definitely. And can you just share a bit more about what Northumbrian Water are doing around menopause support?
Yeah, I think one of the things that as I said, we look at this holistically. So one of the most important things, and this has already been sort of mentioned, but actually is feeling part of a community. So we have a range of different network groups, but our largest, and I would say one of our most vibrant as well, is our Women in STEM network. And one of the things they created last year was a women's wellbeing guide. And it was written by real women in jobs in our business for women. And it was definitely a business-owned, colleague-owned. This wasn't a thing done by HR. This was real stories and real examples. And it covered all of the things that people may feel uncomfortable speaking about, from menstruation, endometriosis, infertility, menopause, perimenopause. But what was really important that we put information, around the business, male toilets, female toilets. It was all over. People could get it digitally. They could look at this. It started to create a conversation about health, and health that impacts both genders at different points. But this was specifically focused on females. As part of our sort of strategy approach in health and wellbeing, we work very closely with our health and safety colleagues. And one of the things our WiseSTEM network have shaped is uniform. So we have far more options around uniform. When you're in an operational workforce, it's been very easy for businesses to think one size fits all. Well, actually, when females, body shapes may change, they may need more, we talk about flooding in menopause can impact people. They may need multiple items of uniform, which historically on a system go like, we don't need 3 pairs of these trousers. Actually, yes, you do. So adjusting a lot of that, very practical things, I think has been something I'm particularly proud about. We're doing it in actions through the everyday.
Yeah, that's really good. Sharon, you've worked in a lot of different businesses.
Yeah.
What would you advise a business who might not be doing anything at the moment, but they want to start supporting women?
Well, it's kind of what Elouise said. You really need to create the conditions to succeed. So you need to really check your own environment first of all. And just in addition, what I would like to say, the gold dust for me that sits in every business are the stories that we hold about ourselves. So I think from a management point of view, it's really, really important that you get senior people and also other people in your management team to role model the relationship building. So I'll tell you a really interesting story. So I was working for a large organisation a few years ago now, and I was working with just a group of managers, and they were telling me that they had health passports. And I was going, well, that sounds like really interesting. Tell me more about that. Well, in our one-to-ones, we ask our people to disclose things about themselves and we write them on these passports. And I said, all right, okay, great. I said, so the question I want to ask you all is, how many of you as managers and leaders in this business have filled out your own health passports? And all I can say is the tumbleweeds, did they blow? And then there was a couple put their hand up, and I was like, okay, then. So I said, and out of the ones who have done it, how many of you have chosen to share what you've written in there with your people? I'm like, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, how can it be fair that your people have to keep sharing everything about themselves to you, but you're not prepared to give them anything back? How is that a true relationship when it seems very one-sided? So I think it's really, really important that you need to look at yourself as a leadership, as a management team, and think, are we prepared to stand up and tell our own stories about ourselves when we're asking our people to tell them to us on a regular basis? And then, of course, education. So you don't know what you don't know, and you might think, well, this maybe isn't affecting me. And really that has to extend to everybody. And then the other thing is, it needs to be written into your people plans and have a strategic approach. And you really need to think about a maintenance plan. So a lot of businesses will write a strategy and it might say it'll last between 3 and 5 years. And then what we do is we tick it off, we sign it off, and we go, we're done now. What I'm saying is that is in danger of becoming a set of events. And you're in danger then of evoking what I call an eye roll from your people, where they go, no, we've done that, when somebody comes in 3 years down the line and says, we're going to pick that back up. So what I'm saying is, you really need to think about, does this, and I know we're talking about menopause today, but does any health and well-being topic need to be forming the part of the DNA of your business? And if it does, then really that should be the legacy. It should be in there, whoever's in charge. So you should hard code that into your DNA, that it doesn't matter whichever CEO joins your business, they can't wipe it away. So think about that. And again, really what Elouise said, ask your people, do they think these topics are important enough to be part of the DNA of your business? And if so, make sure that it's always there.
Yeah, definitely.
I totally agree with that. I think the DNA point in 2020, we took a slightly different approach to health and well-being, which everyone's like, oh, it's not entirely corporate. It's based on the Danish concept of hugar. And it said that actually when you look at human health, it needs to be mind, body and social. And it's based on Little Book of Hugar, which is, a really brilliant one, that healthy humans, it doesn't take loads to keep people healthy, but it takes ongoing care for basic needs. And I think for us, very much sort of speaking to that, for us, that mind, body and social, we literally hold ourselves. We have obviously strategies and things that we know, actually we need to address this. We're looking ahead at our data and saying that's likely to impact that group, or we've got a big group of people, who potentially could experience that. And it could be, when people are hitting a certain age group and likely to support elderly parents, any number of things. But one of the things that we look at is we're going, are we doing sufficient? Are we evolving things? And are we keeping up with what's impacting our people in those things? So that is mental health, physical health, but also connectedness, belonging, and this, being able to speak to people, the right kind of people. And for us, keeping it really simple allows you to hold yourself to account and track that progress whilst you're looking at your future ambitions as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's really interesting. And just in terms of those conversations when they do happen, what psychological safety factors need to be considered?
Yeah, I think from my point of view is, we go back to that bit. So talk about the relationship, that needs to absolutely be there. If you haven't got a relationship with someone, why would you feel comfortable opening up? You don't have trust. And trust, for us, we measure our engagement through a great place to work model. Trust is at its core. And for me, businesses that have trust can actually go through a lot and handle a lot. Businesses that don't tend to really struggle and they don't keep their people. So for me, there's the time and space to have the quality conversation. That's really key. But then for managers and leaders, we talk about, you go into, particularly when you're doing a connect conversation that's got more of a wellbeing focus, you're listening. You're listening potentially, empathizing where that's appropriate and sincere and genuine, but you're listening. Because sometimes managers feel, because of the nature of their jobs, they're responsible for a solution. You're not always responsible for a solution, but you're responsible for potentially partnering and supporting the colleague as they find the solution for them. What we do try and do for our managers is make sure they know routes, so they're really familiar with referral routes. For us, we do actually have a menopause occupational health route, which is both for physical and emotional as well as cognition challenges that people experience, but is making sure managers know they've got a bit of a toolkit of things they can point people towards. But that listening is absolutely key. And then also, it's just a small thing, but psychological safety is also confidentiality. Some people are really happy to be open about what they're experiencing. A lot of people aren't. So, it's treating what someone shares with you with respect, and people watch how you treat other conversations. So, leaders and managers, you're always being watched and observed. So treat anything that people say to you with care and respect, and you'll start to build the culture where people speak up.
Yeah. So Sharon, I'm picking up that historically, menopause has been seen as a women's issue. What role do you think men play in opening up this conversation and supporting menopause in the workplace?
Well, it's back to role modelling again, isn't it? It's back to, so again, I see a lot of eye rolls when, we say to men, you want, come along and learn about menopause. Well, that doesn't affect me. But, 100% of 50% of the population of the world, let's be honest, is going to go through menopause. And the other 50% are going to indirectly are going to encounter it themselves. So what I'm saying is learn about this stuff. And even when I'm doing a lot of work in very male-dominated businesses, those individuals might look around in their own work area and go, well, we don't work with any women. That's got nothing to do with me. But if they identify as male heterosexual, I keep saying women of the world, we're insidious, we're everywhere, there's no escape. So the chances are you're going to know women in your, have them in your life. So what I'm saying is you might be living with a menopausal wife, partner or girlfriend. And over the years, probably some of the most profound feedback I have received and continue to receive has been from men. Now, often left to their own devices, they don't want to come. I totally get that. But because the work I do is completely inclusive, it's suitable for anybody, whether you're, the most junior member of your organization or the CEO, and all genders are welcome. So what I'm saying is come along, learn about this stuff, and see how it may help you. And I've had men telling me this information has possibly helped to save their marriage, their relationships. And what I'm saying is if you work in a very male-dominated environment, and those men might be coming in and saying, look, I'm feeling really mentally unwell. And the root cause might be that the relationship is breaking down at home, and the root cause could be menopause. What about those men who are no longer sleeping because they're sleeping next to a menopausal woman who can't sleep just can't no longer sleep? So what health and safety risk might they be? What impact is that having on their productivity? So that's why I say, and I keep saying, menopause is everybody's business.
Yeah.
And I can't stress that enough.
Absolutely. And I imagine in some of those male-dominated industries, they will still have one or two women. And imagine those women who might be going through menopause and the support that they need, that haven't got that female network around them either. Well,
I'll tell you another interesting story. So this is a few years ago now, and I was talking to this guy who I saw as a bit of a mentor, and I'm sure he still runs the business. So it's about 30 heads, so quite a small business, but about turning over 5, 6, 7 million. And he said, "Oh, that wouldn't apply to me." He said, "I've only got 2 women." And I was like, 2 whole women, 2 real tall women. He went, "Yes." I went, "Well, let's just imagine." I said, "I'm making this up." I said, "But I imagine those 2 whole women probably work in your back office functions. They're probably doing your payroll, doing your administration." He went, "Oh, yes. Have you met them?" And I said, "No, but I'm just imagining that." I said, "Let's just say Sharon and Elouise are maybe in their late 30s, 40s, and they're doing their jobs really well. And then one day one of them wakes up and thinks they can't remember how to do the payroll. And then after a very short space of time, and then less than 6 months, they're not telling anybody because they don't actually know what's happened to them. They tell you they're leaving." He said, "Well, I can't leave. I couldn't run my business. They're brilliant." And I said, "This is why you need to understand the impact of menopause for you and your business, and why you need to be respectful to those women so you could help and help them. But more importantly, again, the men that they're working with." So I said, this is why menopause is a conversation for everybody, and you can't just be thinking, well, I'm a small business, that doesn't impact me, because maybe you might be 100%, male dominated. That's brilliant. But those men are encountering menopause day in, day out. And you just because you can't see it doesn't mean to say it isn't there.
Yeah, definitely. Your stories are brilliant. And I think it really brings to life the situation that many businesses will find themselves in. Elouise, we had a bit of a chat before the podcast, and we were talking about how menopause is now happening more and more in younger women as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we're seeing, you can't assume anything anymore, menopause, perimenopause, a whole range of female health, sort of things of impacting women at different points. I think the key thing for me is making no assumptions and, making sure that, I go back to, it's the basic stuff. Good line managers who care about their people, who know their people, are prepared to handle anything, be it menopause or be it something else as well. People are under more pressures than ever before, particularly when we're seeing some people caught between care of younger people and elder care simultaneously. That's not whilst working. So it's all about that, not making any assumptions and making sure you're carving out space to talk. But we go back to at Northumbrian, we talk about well-being with everyone, because you do not know what people are experiencing, and if people are experiencing something, it impacts on their the contribution it can make, their productivity, how safely they operate, thinking for themselves and others, things like data and stuff like that, data breaches, all these things are so important. So you want people to be functioning in a good place, but also, from our point of view, it's also that people will sort of pull back. I've referenced, we look at our engagement. People who don't feel they can contribute or aren't feeling that's valued are less engaged, and that's really important. So, space for these conversations, not assuming, is, for me, simple but key.
Yeah, it's so important. Sharon, I'm interested to hear your view on women who might be going through menopause or perimenopause who might be concerned about their career prospects.
Okay, well, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we? What I want to say to women of the world is, first of all, you're in the least exclusive club on the planet. I'm going to call it the 100% club. So again, what really breaks my heart is when women say, I felt so alone. I felt like I was the only one this was happening to. So take that statistic and realise you're in the least exclusive club on the planet. And menopause is to be managed, not to be endured. And I think the really important thing is, especially in the workplace, is I talk about personal accountabilities and it being a two-way street. So it's got to be a relationship where both individuals in that relationship join in equally together. So absolutely, there's things that businesses could and should do, small reasonable adjustments, which in the main you already have, which will be operational. But as an individual, your line manager is not wholly responsible for your health and well-being. So what I'm saying is, menopause is to be managed, not to be endured. And there are many, many, many ways that you can and you should manage your menopause. But doing nothing shouldn't be one of them. And that is ultimately what breaks my heart the most. When I ask lots of women, what are you doing about that? Invariably, they'll mostly say, well, I'm just getting on with it. And so what I'm saying is, don't allow yourself to be a victim of menopause, because once you're menopausal, you may not know this, but you are in fact menopausal for the rest of your life. And symptoms can come and go for the rest of an individual's life. And an example I'll give you is my mum at 75 last year started to get hot flushes for the first time after 20 years. So we often use this weird terminology where we say, I'm through with the menopause, I'm through that. What you probably mean is you're through your periods have ended, but the symptoms can be intermittent and it can range from zero, you may not ever have a symptom of menopause, through to forever and anything in between. So I think really understanding that you as an individual can help to manage your own menopause is a really empowering and a really important point to know and to make.
And I think that's a really powerful message for businesses as well, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Because if it is managed effectively, it's going to help productivity, retention, engagement. Yeah. The list goes on, doesn't it?
Well, I talk about menopausalising your current processes. What I'm saying is to businesses, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to start from scratch. So an example would be, I'm sure most of the businesses out there will have a great sound policy, as you will, for the disclosure of pregnancy. So even if you weren't doing anything about menopause, what would you be doing if someone disclosed a pregnancy? Well, if it was appropriate, you might give me a car parking space, the office. You might give me, do a workstation assessment, and I might end up with things like a footrest or a desk fan, for example. So what I'm saying to managers and leaders of the world is, all you have to do now is look in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit that I know you have for mental health, for well-being, for a lot of things, and then flip and apply what's in there. Because as Elouise says, my opinion on managers is you're not paid to have all the answers, but you are truly paid to listen. So everyone will have a unique experience into menopause. So hear my story, and then between you and that individual, decide what is the best course of action, because it's unique and individual to that person. And then menopause can be managed and it doesn't have to be endured. But like I say, it takes both parties working equally together for that to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really positive message. Just to flip that slightly, if we're looking at the ignorance around menopause, what do you think the cost is to the business?
Oh, it depends what you read. I was reading something last night. It said something like 10 billion in one article I've read. So all we need to know is there is a cost. It's not giving us money if we don't wake up and smell the coffee about this subject, and women's health and men's health and health in general. It's going to cost you money. So if you're serious about doing a good job for your customers and making money and paying your staff well, then health in the workplace it's essential. It's not nice to have. It really goes hand in hand with you being the best business you can be in the 21st century.
Elouise, thinking about everything that's worked at Northumbrian Water, what would your advice be to a business who's just starting to look at this right now?
Make sure your line management's working well with the basics. This doesn't have to be fancy or expensive training. This is saying, actually, this stuff's important. Having regular conversations, know your people, and we look to you to have the closest relationship with people. And also look to leaders and managers who naturally do this really well, because often it's understanding how to approach those things, the most natural sort of approaches I've seen. And often we have quite a high proportion of males operational. It's often that sort of side conversation. It's that sort of, how are you? You don't seem quite you, but open up those conversations. I think start with that, make sure you've got that in place. And then I think, look to yourself to say, actually, we know this is something that's impacting people. We know that this will therefore potentially, sort of impact on how much people can contribute, their productivity, their sense of belonging, their intention to stay with us, all of those things. Therefore, have we made available, or should we at least have the knowledge so we can refer people into the right kind of services and support? It's not all got to be, Sharon said absolutely correctly, if it is something that someone's personally experiencing, it's not on a business to solve and fix it, but the business is equal party in wanting this person to be healthy and contributing in the workplace. So start there, start simple and small. You don't necessarily think of huge things, but I'd go back to, a Women in STEM network. People are more likely to get the most value from those conversations with people who are experiencing something similar or experienced something before. A lot of times the workplace has lost community, and particularly post-pandemic, people don't just come together. So make sure you're encouraging, nurturing, not forcing, opportunities for people to come together, talk and share, because actually, Sharon referenced that people can feel lonely. People can feel lonely over lots of different things, but great businesses normalize and encourage people coming together and chatting, and out of that comes many wonderful things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would say, as leaders in your business, make sure you're one of them stepping up and telling your own stories, because that is absolutely transformational and powerful when you get somebody in a senior authority who is prepared to be vulnerable and share their own story. That really breaks down barriers and knocks walls down in an instant.
I think that's a really important message, and that's something that we actually talked about in the previous episode, focusing on mental health and just how important that is. Sharon, if somebody's watching this who might be worried about perimenopause or menopause, what advice would you give them?
Talk to your friends, talk to other people. When I set out on this journey 8 years ago, there was very, very little available to anybody. Now, it's brilliant. You can buy books, you can watch programs, you can listen to podcasts. There's Facebook groups, there's, TikTok things. There's loads of different ways. So if you think you've had a change in your mental health and well-being, in your physical health, and you think you might be in the early stages of menopause, go and do some research. Go and find out. And I always say there's no right or wrong, there's only what's right for you. And if you've noticed a change, again, I'm going to say that point again, doing nothing shouldn't be what you're doing about it. Don't bury your head in the sand. Go forward and see if you can find the solution. And like I say, I'm now 57 and I feel as good as, if not better than, when my menopause began, because I've worked hard on managing my menopause. I've decided that I've gone down the medical route. I take every drug going, HRT, testosterone, vitamin D, etc. I try and go to the gym. So what I'm saying is menopause is to be managed, remember, not to be endured. So go out that. go out there and really give yourself the best chance and live your best life.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful message.
Well, life's a living, isn't it?
Exactly.
So go out and live it.
Exactly, absolutely. So thank you so much, both of you. That's been really insightful conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Can I just ask one final question? What's one thing that you would like our viewers to take away from this conversation?
From my point of view is that, and it's something my mum always used to say to me, is that whatever you're experiencing or facing, someone will have been through it before. And so don't forget that, talking to people, talking to others, using relationships, networks is so important. It's what makes us human. It's what keeps us separate from technology. We're at our best when we're connecting. So humans are better when they're being human. So reach out, connect to people. If you're a business looking at this, talk to other people doing it. Don't just sort of just look at the theory of it, talk to real people.
Brilliant.
And I would say if you're a business who's doing this stuff, shout about it like Elouise is, sharing today. And if you haven't really thought about it, start to maybe reflect upon what impact it might be having on your bottom line, on the health and well-being of your people, and really move forward and thinking about how you could be an even better place to work if you were to make menopause business as usual.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.